Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Catholic Talk Show. Today, we're going to be talking about the beatification of Fulton J. Sheen.
That's right. Fulton Sheen has been a real inspiration to everyone here at the Catholic Talk Show, and we're really lucky to be joined by Bishop Tylka of Peoria, where Fulton Sheen was born and where his beatification is going to be happening this summer. Bishop, welcome to the Catholic Talk Show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation. It's great to be with you.
So Fulton Sheen, his beatification process seems like it had to stop and go. We did an episode a couple years ago where we talked about Fulton Sheen saying that he is the one guy that I think a lot of Americans will really be able to rally behind, especially as his cause for canonization continues, because he, in so many ways, typifies the best of what America is, both in his intelligence, his eloquence, and his use of technology. You know,
Yeah.
us as podcasters, he very much could be the patron saint of podcasters or content producers going forward. How has Fulton Sheen inspired you in your role as Bishop of Peoria?
Well, I have to be honest. I was a priest of Chicago, and I knew of Fulton Sheen. I knew there was a cause, but I was not really the Sheen devotee until I got named to be the bishop here in the Diocese of Peoria. I'll never forget my first day when it was announced that I was to be the bishop. I found out on Twitter that I was now in charge of a cause for canonization. If my head wasn't spinning because I was becoming a bishop, that made my head spin a lot more. And one of the first questions I was asked by one of the media outlets on that first day was, when would I make Fulton Sheen a saint? I quickly said that was above my pay grade. But as long as I serve as Bishop of Peoria, I would certainly promote the cause and also do my part to lift his legacy up. Um, I can build on his legacy and pray that the church would eventually catch up with him, because I think he's already a saint. We're just trying to catch up with him. So that's really when I started to delve into his life and his ministry. Um, Started reading his books. I've only gotten through 4 of the 66. Uh, but I've encountered him in so many ways over the last 6 years, and I each and every day am more and more impressed by what he left us as part of that legacy that I want to uphold now as Bishop of Peoria. You know, I try to in my holy hour, I allow him in. So I try to read a little bit of Sheen each morning. And I don't have to read more than a paragraph or two. And he's given me something really that I need to stop and reflect upon and take even deeper into my prayer with the Lord. So I find him just an inspiring figure. And I look, as I learned from him so many different things, I look at how he was able to communicate. And I think that's probably one of the biggest inspirations I find is his ability to communicate his deep friendship with Jesus with others. His ability to, if he was talking to a president or a prime minister, he would still, be able to engage the next moment in talking to the guy on the street. He was just able, he was a master communicator, and he knew what to say and how to say it, that each person who encountered him would have a powerful encounter of faith, and through him, I think, an encounter with the Lord.
Hmm. Bishop, I'm so grateful for this opportunity to talk about Bishop Sheen, and just excited for you all as a diocese, because
Mhm.
most people have never been up close and personal for this
Right.
process of a beatification or canonization. And I know you got thrust into it. And obviously, his abilities as a preacher and, as you said, communicator, were maybe the best, second best after St. Paul in the history of the
Mhm.
church. But just what aspects of his life, because that's obviously the thing that's under the close scrutiny when they're making him, when looking at beatifying and canonizing someone, was most edifying for you, as you've kind of gotten to know him, his life, or that lesson that you're trying to share from that for priests or lay people, religious, when you're introducing them to Sheen, or telling them about him.
I there's a couple aspects of his life that I think perhaps get overlooked. Um, it's easy to look at him and his ability for communicating and using the latest technology, right?
Mhm.
We take for granted that we can do this podcast over the computer, right? He was using the technology that was new in his day, and he was using it masterfully. But the thing that I think that some of the things that I think we overlook is first and foremost, you know, his life was rooted in prayer. He was the great advocate of a daily holy hour. He was faithful to administering the sacraments as a priest. Uh, when he won his Emmy, he attributed his writers Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Right? He could say things like that because it was true of that deep friendship that he had in prayer. And I think that maybe that's something that we don't necessarily uh, grasp onto because we go right to the celebrities part of his
Mm.
life. I think the other thing that we need to really reflect upon is his values. We talk about wholesome Midwest values. He learned that here. I mean, that was one of the things that I think he carried throughout his life was the values that his family instilled in him of the importance of faith, the importance of family, importance of education when he was a kid. Um, I love the story of as a kid when he stole the flowers to give to his mother, and his mother found out about it, and she made him pay twice.
Yeah.
um,
Mm.
you know, so those the values that rooted him that came from his family right from the start. um and I think the last thing is he really genuinely cared about people. you know he really wanted um to win people over for Christ, but he wanted people's souls to be saved, and that deep desire to reach somebody, would put him in situations where, he just was willing to go, and willing to, respond in the moment. The anecdotal stories that you hear of what he did, one that comes to mind was he was talking with someone and kind of trying to lead her back into the faith, and she was kind of resistant and said he was kind of walking around. I think it might have been in St. Patrick's Cathedral, but he was walking with her, and she's like, "I'll talk to you as long as I don't have to go to confession, and as long as you don't tell me I have to go to confession." And as they walked by the confessional, he pushed her into the confessional and then jumped in and said, "I didn't tell you had to go to confession, but here's your opportunity, right?"
While we're here, right?
Exactly. So, he had a great sense of humor, and he just would, in those moments, figure out a way to communicate that. But it was because he really cared about the person. It wasn't, "I'm not going to do this to get a laugh. I'm not going to do this, to argue my point. I'm going to do this because I care about you and I want you to experience the love of Jesus that I've experienced."
Mm.
Yeah, Ryan, you and I have had the opportunity to see some of his personal effects up close from his work at the Pontifical Mission Societies in New York. We had the opportunity, we worked with them and went in, got to see some of his personal writings, his sweaters, things like that. Um, that was a pretty cool experience. And Ryan, I know that you have I mean, your conversion came about in Eucharistic adoration and holy hours. So I think you and he have something really in common around that, Ryan.
Yeah. And I also had a very unique experience with Archbishop Dolan in New York City for Paul Watson's, I think Reverend Paul Watson's canonization. And they sent all the documents to Rome, and there was a big process that was going on. And I found myself sitting at this table saying, "What am I even doing here?" You know, but it was such a unique experience. And obviously, in Archbishop Dolan's way, he, made it all very fun and jovial. Uh, But I do have a question because I think this is something that interests me in being somewhat close to his process for beatification. What are some of the things that you've seen in the church? Obviously, becoming bishop, you're a shepherd of a diocese. There's been a whole process involved with this. What are some, moments that you've seen in the church that gave you hope just centered around this process? Because, I think a lot of people are like, oh, he's a saint. I'm going to pray to him. But I think a lot of people don't realize the church's response to this process and what that means for a shepherd like yourself. Are there any things you can share with us about this process that brought you a lot of hope in our church?
Well, obviously back in 2019 when the beatification was paused, there was a lot of disappointment. Um, I look, from my vantage point, I'm the Bishop of Peoria now, and I'm humbled and honored that I shepherd this now, this effort now, and prepare for a beatification. Um, in some sense, I look back and I think it's God's providence. The beatification is happening now, and it didn't happen then. Uh, America's bishop is going to be beatified during America's 250th anniversary. Part of our 150th anniversary of our diocese, and there's a whole story behind that as well. But also the fact that you know we're planning a beatification ceremony where 70,000 plus of our closest friends will join us. Right? We deliberately chose to do the beatification at the Dome at the America Center down in St. Louis, so we can maximize people's participation and presence for such a momentous and historic moment in the life of the church. Um, I think the other thing I would say is that in the last 6 years that I have now served as bishop in Peoria, no matter where I go, um, obviously Sheen means a lot to us here in our diocese. And one of the things I learned early on when I was serving as the coadjutor bishop and hosting listening sessions around our diocese, I learned how important he is to the local church, and how proud they are in a good sense. And so that was kind of a given, I guess, in some ways. But in my now 6 years, as I have traveled both for the mission and ministry that I have, and as I've just traveled on vacation, when I say I'm the Bishop of Peoria, it always comes back to Sheen. And that was the case in travels across the United States. It was the case in traveling to Tanzania a couple years ago, going on pilgrimage in France and in Italy. All I need to say is that I'm the Bishop of Peoria, and Sheen will become part of the conversation. And it's always how he impacted others, whether it was simply through reading a book, watching him on TV, listening to him on the radio. He had a connection to them, and that changed them. And so, in some ways, what I'm trying to say is I've been changed because of my encounter of Sheen over the last 6 years. I know that he's given a lot to me, to personally as a priest think about and to reflect upon and challenge myself in my ministry. But he also just gave a great witness of, the ministry of presence, of communication, and expressing the love I have for Jesus in the way that he was able to express his love for Jesus. That's really a gift that inspires me each day when I get up and I begin my ministry that day.
Bishop, another bishop, one of your brother bishops, told me one time that there's two people that a bishop never wants to visit his diocese, and that's the Pope or the Virgin Mary, because it means there's a lot of paperwork.
Exactly.
So I can only imagine there's been a ton of paperwork around the beatification, right? Because
Mhm.
for those who don't know, the beatification process, the church takes it very seriously. The amount of research they go into in researching these holy people is tremendous. It blows legal cases out of the water because the church has to make sure, the church has to know, with no doubt whatsoever, that the decision is being rightly made. And part of that process is miracles. So, Bishop, what miracle has been attributed to soon to be blessed Fulton Sheen that led to his beatification?
Yeah, it's a great story. There is a family that actually lives not too far from Peoria, a little bit east, in a neighboring town. Very devout family, good family, and they were planning for the birth of one of their children. That they're planning the birth at home, and so when the mother went into labor, the folks necessary to help with the birth at home had all assembled, and they were helping to deliver the child. When the child was delivered, there was no heartbeat,
Mm.
and the family had a devotion to Fulton Sheen and began praying to him immediately as they were struggling with the birth, and that the baby was, of course, brought to the hospital as quickly as possible to see whether or not the baby was going to survive, especially when there's no noticeable heartbeat and that. After 61 minutes, when the doctors at the hospital were basically ready to call the situation and say that the child was not going to live, did not live, there was all of a sudden a noticeable pulse and the heartbeat. And so that young man is now like 15 years old.
Wow.
There's no, there was no residual effect from uh, not having a pulse for 61 minutes. He's a great normal 15-year-old kid, and so the miracle is that after 61 minutes, this child came to life as the family was praying and committed to asking Sheen intervene and bring their child to life.
So does this kid get tickets to the beatification?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, along with that, obviously, for those who don't know, that the process of the approval of a miracle, as all the medical proofs that have to go along with that, all the investigation, lots of other stories I'm sure are coming forward that maybe don't have the documentation, or in a sense are miracles, or are maybe no less miraculous. But have y'all been experiencing a lot of those, or receiving a lot of notifications of those? Because I know some people have been praying for Bishop Sheen's intercession for a long time.
Sure. Actually, we get regular communication to the Sheen Foundation. We invite people to obviously pray through the intercession of Sheen for favors and miracles to happen. So we do get regular reports that come in. We actually have 5 potential miracles that we will begin to investigate once the beatification takes place. So the hope is that it won't be long after beatification that we'll be able to confirm a second miracle and move on to canonization. But yeah, there's constant reports of folks saying that a favor was granted because of their prayer through Sheen. With his tomb in our cathedral, we have visitors come really on a daily basis, and on occasion, I'm fortunate to be in the cathedral or passing through the cathedral and encountering some of these folks, and I've met folks from all over the country who have come to ask for his intercession for various things. So the devotion is there, and when Sheen passed away, he said that he wanted to go to heaven for about a week, and then he wanted to send the Lord to send him back to do some more work. So
Mm.
I think he's active and around in many ways.
Yeah, I'm always amazed by the energy he displayed. You said 66 books, radio, TV, working in charities, was an active bishop. Bishop, I know you know how much work that is.
Yeah.
Had time for a holy hour every day and still made time to visit with his family, have friends, have a normal, healthy life. You know, what are you guys putting in the water in Peoria that's making people like this? You know, what is it about that area that you mentioned those kind of Midwest values, but how formative was your diocese and just the ground there, the dirt there, the way people live that formed this man who was able to, you know, like Clark Kent, go from the Midwest and go hit a big time in the big city.
Yeah. You know, I honestly, I'll tell you a story. When I first became bishop here, it was during COVID. And so, you know, there were still lots of restrictions and things that going on. And I remember watching, getting home one day and I was watching a program on PBS and they were talking about the ice age and the glaciers. And the person they were talking to was talking about when the glaciers came and it came south, they basically stopped in my diocese. And I realized that they're talking to this person who was standing, you know, in a town that's less than a half hour from where I'm actually watching this program, right? And then they were talking about when the glaciers receded, there was so much, you know, nutrients and stuff that's created why we have some of the most fertile soil in the world for growing crops. And I joke I have more corn and soybeans in my diocese than I do people. Uh, but you know, I think of that image, and I think of that image as the fact that I'm sure it's true in other dioceses, but I speak for my diocese, right? I think we have fertile soil, and I think Sheen grew up in a community that was fertile soil for the seed of faith to be planted and then allowed to grow and to be nurtured. You know, he was born in El Paso, Illinois, which is about 30 miles east of Peoria, but his family, in order to get him a Catholic education, moved from El Paso to Peoria so he can get a Catholic education. You know, that's kind of, you know, the crux of what I'm trying to say is there's good soil here in the hearts of people and the souls of people, that when the seed of faith, which I think the Lord plants, when we nurture that seed, when we allow it to kind of crack open and begin to grow, um, I witness in my diocese an openness to that allows people to respond to how the Lord is now working and active in their life. I always say everybody has a vocation, maybe some to priesthood, maybe some to religious life, some to married life, some to single life, you know, and your career can be your vocation. It's how you're going to live that out. And, you know, I think Sheen just grew up in an environment that is still here today where that fertile soil that the Lord's planted the seed in is growing and yielding lots of fruit.
Hmm. Bishop, I've got a question about. I felt that one of the things that soon to be Blessed Sheen did so beautifully was remind people of the beauty and also the call to holiness of the different states of life within the church. I think Three to Get Married is kind of his famous book, but so
Yep.
many other talks that he
Yep.
talked about just the reality of marriage. And there's so many married couples or marriage programs that benefited from that. Of course, you know, the priest is not his own, and just how much he wrote about the missions, the call to life in the missions and religious life. So yeah, so within that, as far as your own call, your own and our own call to encourage vocations, encourage holy marriages, to people to find, you know, to live, you know, the universal call to holiness. Do you see that bearing fruit in your own diocese and something that a real touch point for you guys, the work, kind of the legacy that he has there?
Yeah, I think it's uh, you know, the first thought that occurs to me as you say that, Father Michael, is you know, recently in one of my readings with him in the morning, he was talking about the importance of the holy hour. And I thought it was interesting. He talked about it's important to make a holy hour. And after he gave the reasons why it's important to make a holy hour, his first thing was to talk about how the laity should make the holy hour.
Hmm.
You know, so this is important. These are 10 reasons why you should make a holy hour. Now let me tell the laity first how you
Hmm.
make your holy hour. And then the next, you know, reflection was how priests should make their holy hour, you know. So that sense, the universal call to holiness that we all share in. We're all called to be saints. You know, we're not all called to be Fulton Sheen because he was unique, right? We don't have to be any other saint than the one that God wants us to be. But that sense of when you look at to his life and when you read, as you point out, 3 to get married, a priest is not his own. His witness of the truth of our faith, the beauty of the sacraments, and the calling that we're all called to share in advancing the gospel. You know, his passion was to bring people to Christ. You know, one of the things that I say a lot, like, is that if you encounter Sheen, you encounter the Lord.
Hmm.
You know, and we want people to encounter the Lord, so we use the instrument of Sheen to introduce them, because again, his ability to communicate, his wit, his wisdom, mostly his faith and his love just rings through almost everything, you know, you read or you see or and encounter in him. So that's you know, we're all called to be saints. We're all called to follow our path of holiness. And he just invites us to keep looking at that in so many different aspects.
Have you been inspired at all yet with some forethought in how uh once he's canonized, God willing, your diocese would handle that in a sense of, you know, you see a lot of like chapels where people are interred or
Mhm.
you know, pilgrims come in certain forms. Have you been inspired to give any forethought to how that would manifest itself in your diocese at all?
Absolutely. So I will respond in two ways. One is that, you know, we welcome everybody now, and just in announcing the beatification, we've seen our numbers increase significantly, and we certainly expect that to just continue to grow as we near the beatification and after the beatification as well. So his tomb presently is in our cathedral. It's in a side chapel we call the Lady Chapel, appropriate as his great devotion to the Blessed Mother. So, uh, you know, for him to be there is a great privilege and honor for us. And folks are welcome to come now to pray in that. Back in 2021, I started when again, going back to, I can't make him a saint, but I can promote his life and legacy. Back in 2021, I started conversations with folks around here that have developed over the years, for us to open what we now call the Sheen Experience. And so we are in the process of developing and in Sheen term retreading the high school that he went to. So Spalding Institute is the old high school building that he went to. He was valedictorian of his class, and we are in the process of creating the Sheen Experience, which will be a place where people can come and learn about his life. But my vision, my dream that we've been promoting and working on is, I don't want it to be kind of like a building that you just come and go, oh, I learned a little bit about Sheen. I want it to be a building for people to encounter the Lord through him. So we're looking to use, as he did, the latest, greatest technology to have people experience Sheen in a whole new way and introduce him to a whole new generation of people. Uh, I'm not the expert in these things, but you know, the thing that I like to describe it as I grew up in the 70s. I'm a child of Star Wars and Star Trek and all. You know, if you go on the holodeck on Star Trek, you know, you walk in and all of a sudden you're surrounded by an environment that just is kind of created. You know, my dream is you're going to walk into the immersive experience and you're going to feel like you just walked on set of Life is Worth Living and have Sheen talk to you, you know, because there's so much material there. And that's so,
Yeah.
working with folks far smarter than I, we're in development of that. Our hope is, obviously we're raising the funds to do this. Our hope is actually within about 2 years, 3 years at most, we'll be opening the doors to the new Sheen experience.
That's
I
awesome.
love that.
Bishop,
If I can ask you about just again his television program called Life is Worth Living. I think now, particularly today, and young people, but also just people of all ages today, we're we're facing such a crisis of hopelessness, of anxiety, of the mental health crisis, self harm, disorders of various types. And in a sense, I love the fact that if you go through his old tapes and shows, so much of it was spoken. Obviously, his fonts, his source is always Jesus, but it's spoken that anybody from any faith background or no faith could be able to hear something and speak to them to help to give them like, oh yeah, their life is worth living.
Right.
Again, that fundamental question that I think is just so encouraging and so necessary. So yeah, maybe just to speak about that, both his legacy, but also our call as evangelists in the church, as priests and pastors, and the work that we do with podcasting and other stuff, of being able to the message that we bring that's uniquely housed in the church that is really needed for in the world today.
Yeah, I mean, we live in a troubled world. We live in a polarized world, and there's lots of issues that we face, and there's a lot of challenges that we have to overcome. Uh, Part of Sheen's gift is his clarity, and his conviction, and he spoke the truth of the gospel to the world. Many problems of his day are still problems of our day, but he was willing to confront them, uh, always, with the firm conviction of his faith, but also with a great deal of compassion and love. He did not shy away from the hot button issues that honestly, I think a lot of us, we do, I mean, these days how many people couldn't have Thanksgiving dinner because they were afraid politics was going to ruin the family gathering, right? He was not afraid to say, what he thought was the truth that needed to be said about any issue. In fact, he usually started there. He kind of went for it, and then but it was always spoken again with that sense of charity and love in his address. Wanting to lead people, right? You know, uh, we accept people for who they are and where they're at, not where we want them to be, right? We got to love them to lead them to the Lord, so that the Lord can do the work on their hearts and change their needs and their behaviors, and move them away from their sinfulness and all. uh that's what she wanted to do. He wanted to lead people to think about who they were and who God calls them to be, and that's what makes life worth living, is that relationship with the Lord. And again, beyond his books and his talks and that, I mean, he gave retreats. There's so much material there. I'm amazed at how often he refers to that friendship he had with the Lord, and that friendship is what we're inviting each other into, right? To overcome some of, especially the challenges of isolation and you know we think we communicate because we got a phone and that, but you need human interaction. At times you need somebody to, give you a hug, and at other times you need a swift kick in the butt, and that's only going to come from real human interaction.
Mm.
And that's what he wanted people to have.
well, as Fulton Sheen would say, well, I'm presuming if he had a podcast, make sure you click the like and subscribe button if you're watching this. Fulton Sheen would know all about the algorithm. And let me tell you about the algorithm. If you don't do that, not enough people get to see this. So we want to share this message about the upcoming beatification of Fulton Sheen. So make sure you share this episode. Bishop, we had Fulton Sheen on as a guest of the Catholic Talk Show at one point using technology. Remember that, Ryan? So we were able to compile his, it was so much fun. So we were able to take his old speeches and have a conversation with him.
Sure.
And we were able to interview him. Unfortunately, it got taken down for copyright strikes, so you can't find it on YouTube. But you can find it on the podcast services. I'll see if we can put it back up and maybe appeal. Maybe I know a guy over at the Fulton Sheen Foundation and maybe help us out. But The beatification is coming up this summer. Even before we were planning on having this conversation with you, the three of us are saying we want to be there. We want to go. This is an incredibly joyful moment. Like you said, we have an American Pope. It's the 250th anniversary of America. And we're going to have what I think a lot of people say is our American saint, Fulton Sheen. Tell us a little bit about what the beatification will be. You mentioned that it's going to be in St. Louis. What are the dates? How can people find out more? How can people plan their visit? How can you get tickets?
Yeah. All good questions. I'll give you the best answers I can. So the Beatification Mass itself is at the Dome at the America Center in St. Louis on September 24th, 2026. The Mass will begin at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. That was a big decision because obviously being from Peoria, we wanted to celebrate it locally. But as I said to the folks that are on my team, Sheen is not just for Peoria, he's for the world.
Yeah.
And that's why we have to do it in a venue that would accommodate and maximize people's participation. So we are planning the beatification down there, the Mass itself. But we are surrounding all of the events here in Peoria. It's only a 2.5-hour drive from the Dome to Peoria. So to prepare for the beatification, which is important, never lose sight of what we're doing, why we're doing it. Our spiritual preparation, we're planning a novena of holy hours. So starting on September 15th, we will have a holy hour each evening at 7 p.m. here at our cathedral. And each night we're going to reflect on some aspect of Sheen's life and legacy. So we're inviting various folks to come in to offer the reflection during the holy hour on topics such as education, Eucharist, the missions, priesthood, and that. So each night, those will be definitely live streamed on our local page. We're working with some folks to see if we can get that even broadcast even further. So we'll have our novena of holy hours leading up to the beatification itself. The beatification down in St. Louis on Thursday, and then on Friday we're going to return to Peoria. We're going to have a series of masses of Thanksgiving. On Friday we'll have 4 masses. I'm going to do the first one since I'm the Bishop of Peoria, and then Archbishop Hicks is going to come from New York and celebrate the second one. Bishop Benici, the Bishop of Rochester, will come for the third one. We're holding off on the fourth one to find out if Cardinal Tagle is going to return to Peoria with us. He is the papal representative for the beatification. If not, I'm sure there'll be a few other bishops around, so we'll have a bishop for the fourth Mass. The other thing we're doing on that Friday is we're going to have, in 3 of our parishes, we're going to have speakers give reflections on different things about Sheen's life. So there'll be opportunities for folks to go to 3 of our local parishes to listen to some people talking about Sheen. And that night, we're going to have our first Sheen Award Gala. So we're beginning inaugurating some new award that we want to give to folks who are like Sheen, innovative in spreading the gospel or committed to serving the church in similar fashions. So we're working on what will be a great night for offering some awards and gathering people, to celebrate the joy of the beatification. Lastly, on Saturday, we know that we're going to have 2 additional masses, probably end up with more, but the 2 that have been scheduled are kind of unique. One is going to take place at El Paso, St. Mary's in El Paso, the place where parish where he was baptized, and Bishop John Barris from Rockville Center is going to preside at that Mass because he was baptized by Fulton Sheen.
wow.
Make that connection
So
of
cool.
Sheen's baptism and Bishop Barris's baptism. And then Sheen was also bi-ritual. And so we've invited the Byzantine Bishop Pipta from the Eparchy of Parma is going to come and celebrate the Divine Liturgy as well. So those are all of the official events that have been scheduled thus far. We have our website, celebratesheen.com, celebratesheen.com. That's where all the information is, the most up-to-date information. And that's where, you know, as things continue to get planned and developed, we will be posting all the information there. Tickets will be available. My goal is no later than June 1st. All of the events have to be ticketed, but it's quite a logistical challenge. We have to use Ticketmaster for the dome. Ticketmaster doesn't do the other thing, so we have to use another provider for the holy hours and that. So we're diligently working as quickly as possible to get all of those things in place. I've given a deadline of June 1st to hopefully be able to release the ticket sales at that point. But again, going to celebratesheen.com, you'll get the most up-to-date information as the plans continue to develop.
That's awesome. Hey, Bishop, if you need us to park cars or anything like that, you just let us know. All right. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Bishop, we really appreciate you taking the time to join us here and talk about Fulton Sheen. Like I said, he's a patron of our show and of the work that we do, and he's been an incredible inspiration both in our work and in our personal devotions. And we can't thank you enough for taking this time and for the work that you've done there in the Diocese of Peoria. And hopefully we get a chance to see you at, you know, biggest party of this year, party of the summer.
I think it's great. I appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you. I enjoyed it, and thank you for helping us spread the word.
Got it. Well, thank you all for joining us today, this very special episode of the Catholic Talk Show. We'll see you next week.